Hi, I'm Rachel Barbeau with TideSportsExtra.com. We're here at the SEC Championship Roundtable. We've got Chase Goodbread, the Tuscaloosa News. Of course, I'm from the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports Extra. We're very happy to be with Pat, Dooley, and Robbie, Andreu of the Gainesville Sun. How are you guys doing?
Great to be here. And we have a real roundtable this time.
Yeah, we do. Last time we had a square table. That wasn't right.
The roundtable works.
Yeah,
the roundtable works. So a lot of build-up to this game. Obviously, two of the best teams in the SEC. Everybody thinks the SEC is a dominant conference in the country. Has there been a bigger SEC game for you historically?
I thought last year's game was maybe going to be the biggest college football game I'd ever seen. You have to say this one is at least as big anyway. I mean, Florida comes in without a loss, which was not the case last year. Heisman Trophy may yet be on the line this year, which was really not quite as much the case last year. Yeah, I think this one's a little bigger than it was a year ago, and I won't be surprised if it's the biggest one I see in my lifetime.
It's hard to get bigger than 12-0 and 12-0. And Robbie, we've talked about this before. Florida and Alabama the last 2 years in SEC regular season games, 31-1, and the loss was by 1 point. I mean,
amazing domination.
They have dominated this league, and I think everybody, like Urban Meyer said, this is a game that college football wants to see, and I think he's right.
Yeah, and people want to see it for a long time now, and the fact that both teams got here 12-0 is just huge. It's a play-in game for the national championship, and like Chase said, the Heisman could be decided tomorrow night. I think it's the biggest game in the history of the conference.
You made a great
12-0.
And historically, is this the first time that's happened? I believe two undefeated teams in the SEC playing.
It is
for the championship game and a tie-in.
Any conference championship game. And the interesting thing is, when you look at what Florida and Alabama have done and played each other, this is the seventh time they played each other in this game. And I'm starting to think this is a rivalry. I mean, Florida's got enough rivals as it is.
They have another one now.
With Tennessee, Georgia, Florida State, and Miami. I almost forgot Florida State, but it's easy to do these days. But now, Alabama and Florida, I think it's become a rivalry.
I think with Urban Meyer, it became a rivalry when the Tide whipped his butt that first year in Tuscaloosa, when Tim Tebow was at that game on an official recruiting visit.
Well, you look at the amount of talent that's on both sides of the ball and the amount of the guys that will go into the NFL from this championship game, and that right there just is outstanding.
Yeah, it'll be a game where you look back and say, look at all the NFL players that were in that game.
What makes these two programs the best in the league?
I don't think there's any question what it is. Coaching. I mean, you could say tradition, fan base, recruiting base. Mike Shula had the same thing. Mike DeBose had the same thing. Ron Zook had the same thing. You've got to have the right guy as the CEO. He's got to be the guy who has got everything in line, and recruiting has got everything in line in terms of calling the right plays at the right time, discipline, all that stuff. Saban, obviously, we know what he's done. And Chase, I mean, Urban Meyer's done a remarkable job at Florida.
He has, and I'll take your point. I agree with your point, and I'll extend it a little bit. For me, coaches, not just me, but I think in general, coaches are defined at the college level anyway by three main things. One, what kind of motivator they are. Two, how good they are with X's and O's on Saturdays. And three, what kind of recruiter they are.
Right.
And Saban and Meyer have check marks by all three of those. Not every coach does.
Yeah, and I agree with Chase on that. And one other thing you can add to it, player development. These two coaches recruit great players and turn them into great players, because there's a big difference between what you get coming out of high school, what you have at college, and these guys develop talent. This is big.
They both know what they want at every position. I want a corner who does this. I want a middle linebacker. This is what I want, and they go out and they evaluate. And you're right, Robbie. People who look at recruiting, they look at stars. They look at the 4-star, 5-star, 3-star. What are you? No, it's about evaluation and development. You evaluate guys and you get guys that fit. Jeff Demps is a perfect example. When he was signed, I was like, "What? Why are they signing a track guy?"
He's a football
player. He knew what he was doing, and then you develop those guys. So that's why they're at the top. It's not the facilities. It's not fan base, it's the coaches.
Look at what the coaches have done this year with the distractions, the sheer number of distractions that Urban Meyer has had this year. And Nick Saban, his philosophy of covering throughout the season is one game at a time. You know, he does not let those players get beyond that next game, whether it's UTC or North Texas or Mississippi State or the SEC championship game. So I think you are absolutely right that it starts at the top of these guys.
And that goes back to focus. I mean, when you're a good coach, you're able. Everybody says we want to focus, but only the good coaches get guys to focus every week, week in and out. You talked about the distractions. I already coined the season of the weird. I've never seen a season like. In fact, I texted one of the SEC people during all the stuff after Urban got his fine, which was the second.
One more distraction.
Yeah, and he goes, "I'm ready for basketball season." I'm like, I am too. It's just been bizarre.
When you look at these two teams, and we're looking at the matchups tomorrow, how do you think Alabama defends this spread option offense of Florida? And we'll start with that, and then we're going to flip the question around. We'll start with you.
I think you attack it a little bit. The teams that have had success have had linebackers that attack. Tim Tebow, they put pressure on. I think Alabama has to be aggressive, but not too aggressive because that's when the option burns you. But I think they have to get after Tim Tebow and be aggressive and attack this offense.
Because you're not going to shut him down. You can only limit him.
No, they're going to give up some plays, but
right.
I think attack it, create some bad plays.
And I think you play the two deep zone. That's what the teams that have had the most success against Florida play two deep, and they say Riley Cooper, Deontay Thompson, neither one of those guys is going to beat us. And then you've got to pick your poison on the option. Am I going to take Tebow out? Am I going to take the pitch guy out? Or am I going to take the tight end out on the shovel pass? And you're going to give up some plays because of that.
But keep Florida at a 3rd and 4 and 5.
Yes.
Get them in 3rd and 9, and that's when you have a good chance to stop. If you don't do that, they're going to control the ball, and your offense is going to stay on the sideline.
They don't miss on 3rd and 3 very often. Yeah.
Florida's offense has helped its defense a great
really
deal
has,
by controlling the ball and taking care of it. So.
Tebow's so strong. When they get 3rd and 3 or less, I mean, it's not a given, but God, he's able to drag people so effectively and just as well when Florida gets the ball inside the 5-yard line with Tebow. How often do they have to kick a field goal? Very rarely, and the option's a big reason why. It's going to be tough for Alabama.
Well, you look at Florida and what they have to do to defend Alabama. And Urban Meyer was asked about this offense of Alabama, how he thinks it's changed, and he said he doesn't think that it has changed that much. Will Florida be completely sold out like Auburn was last week to stopping the run, making McElroy throw the ball, and making him engineer those long drives and really get it up in the air?
I think the key to that is Florida has cornerbacks that can cover man-to-man. If you have that, you can put 8 men in the box and try to team up on Ingram. I think that's going to be the plan, kind of the Auburn plan. Go 8 men in the box and go man-to-man coverage with your corners. So.
But you're also going to have a safety over the top on Julio Jones because you cannot let him get deep. But the thing that you, and Robbie, you pointed this out when we were on our drive up here. And props to Karen for driving us up here, by the way. But on the drive up here, we were talking about this. Auburn kept hurting with the crossing pass.
Yes.
And that's what Florida's got. I'm sure has looked at that and said, all right, we got to come up with a solution to that because that's what they really killed them on.
Well, yeah, they converted those big 3rd downs that kept that big winning drive going. They never covered that play. So.
And there were a couple of crossing routes that kept Alabama's drive alive against Auburn that allowed them to win the Iron Bowl at the end. Matter of fact, one of them was a pick play. But, you guys have seen a lot more of Florida than I have. But from what I understand, Florida's done a really good job against the run this year without committing 8 in the box and just kind of playing straight up honest football. The way Alabama's offensive line performed against Auburn, it was their worst game of the year by far. I wonder if Florida's not just going to play a straight-up 7-man front and see if they can handle Ingram that way, but we'll see. What
about special teams, guys? Who's got the edge in special teams? Because you look at a guy like Javier Arenas, he's a game changer. You look at the fact what Florida's been able to do and the very few amount of punt return yards. It's remarkable. And I keep hearing day in and day out that this is going to be a very low-scoring affair. It's going to be a close game, and it's going to be a game of field position and who commits the least amount of mistakes. Who has the edge in special teams? We'll start with you, Chase.
I got to say Florida, but not by much. I like Arenas more than James. I think they are better at that spot. I think Arenas is stronger. He's a tackle breaker. I think he's a little bit more dangerous. James, as great as he is, he only averaged about 7 yards per punt return this year, so it wasn't as big a year as he's had in the past. But I still like Florida special teams because of the coverage units you mentioned. Alabama's one of the worst teams in the country in terms of kickoff coverage. They gave up 2 touchdowns earlier in the season on kickoff returns. Should have given up another one to Mississippi State on a play where the kid got called with a foot out of bounds and never got touched. if Florida's able to bust a kickoff return or two past the 50, that could be huge.
Changes the momentum of the game.
I agree with Chase, though, with, the return game of Alabama scares the daylights. Arena scares the daylights out of Meyer. And Meyer is the coach of special teams, so that's where I give him the edge. That he is so hands-on with his special teams, and his cover teams have been unbelievable. I think a slight edge just because of Urban Meyer and those cover teams.
Yeah, and the thing about Chaz Henry is the reason that is their cover teams are very good, but he kicks the ball so high.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
I've never seen a guy, and I'm Ray Guy maybe, but a guy who kicks at 45 with hang time and there's so many fair catches or ball 45-yard punts out of bounds.
Yeah.
And that's been a big plus.
Yeah, and Meyer has said that this kid could boom him 70 yards consistently, but you're out kicking your coverage. So kick it high, kick it 40, 45, no returns.
What about last year? You've got Alabama that lost here.
Right.
And then they went on and they get blown out by Utah. So a lot of people talked about Utah all season long, and they had the spread offense. But I mean,
you're back, Pat.
All right. I thought Tebow would walk in the room.
I think he did. There he is.
There's his halo. But they played Utah, and they another spread offense, and that term is loosely used because it's applicable to a lot of teams. All right, so they get beat in the fourth quarter, particularly against Florida here, and then Utah. Who is it a bigger loss for if, say, Alabama loses this year or Florida loses this year?
Much bigger loss for Alabama, I think. I think for Alabama to go to back-to-back Sugar Bowls when they had a shot at a national championship, lost that and lost the conference championship, and they go back to the Sugar Bowl to play. Last year it was it's Utah. Well, this year it'll be Cincinnati. I mean, that would. I think that would really deflate Alabama. Florida loses this game. Tim Tebow's legacy is still sealed, so I think it's definitely a bigger loss for Alabama.
Yeah, and Alabama last year, that was a letdown loss to Utah. Nothing more. I mean, it wasn't the spread. It wasn't Urban Meyer talking to the coaches of Utah. But it was, but it was the fact that it was such a huge letdown. And I agree with Chase. The pressure is on Alabama now to get to the big game and play there. And Tebow's legacy is set. He can add to it tomorrow, but he's set no matter what happens.
Well, I think that the bottom line is last year we couldn't figure out, as we were sitting down at the Harbor Beach Marriott, why Alabama played so badly until we read the stories that you guys are writing. And I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking, I can see that. I can see if Florida loses this game. I mean, this team has been through so much, and they walk in and they lose that game, even if it's close, and now they're going to the Sugar Bowl to play Cincinnati. I wouldn't be surprised to see them lay an egg. So it is. I agree with you, though. It's bigger for Alabama, but don't tell Tim Tebow that.
What good is a regular season, a perfect regular season, 2 years back to back? It's never happened at Alabama. What good is that if you go to the SEC championship and are not able to beat your rival, like we talked about Florida?
For both teams, it's all about winning a championship. 12-0, no championship. It feels kind of.
And in the record books, it says 12-2.
Do you guys think at all that this will affect how Tim Tebow is remembered? Do you think Tracy Wolfson will wear the eye black even if he loses the game tomorrow?
Well, don't get me started there, but
that's another story. I
think it affects his legacy nationally. I think and we've had this question out there for a year: is he the best player to ever play college football? And I think if he loses this game, there'll be a lot of people to say, well, no, because he didn't win that game. He won't affect his legacy in Gainesville. Won't affect his legacy in the Gator Nation. Won't affect his legacy as far as the SEC, I don't think. But nationally, I think it does affect his legacy.
I think he's already on the pedestal.
I think so too.
I mean, I agree with Pat that nationally people might look at it as a little bit of a letdown, but he had obviously Chris Leak was the starting quarterback for that first national title, but he had a significant hand in that.
They don't win it without him. They don't win it without him.
Absolutely not.
That's a ring. He can. It's not like a backup or something. That ring's his. And I think he loses this game, leaves Florida with two of those and a Heisman Trophy. There's very few people in the history of the game could stack up something like that. Speaking of the Heisman Trophy, I've been saying this week that for Ingram to have a chance, Alabama win has to be coupled with he can't win the Heisman Trophy if Alabama doesn't win the game. Same with Tebow, do y'all think?
I think so.
No, he's got no chance if they don't win. I think it's Colt McCoy's trophy right now as we sit here today. But if Tebow's got some magic, he can overtake him. And I really think it's those three. I think Ingram's going to have to do something really special because of the game last week.
Right.
And then Gerhardt. Gerhardt's going to get a lot of votes. West Coast votes are going to to be all Gerhardt, but he's not playing this week, and that hurts him.
Well, Pat, what do you say to the thought that that you kind of almost have to give him a little bit of a pass, Ingram a little bit of a pass because it was a rivalry game, that you can't make the ding quite as big on him because it was a rivalry game?
No, because I was at a rivalry game on Saturday night, and the guy I covered had 5 touchdowns.
Okay.
So, and I think that, and again, he was injured in that game. And I like Mark Ingram a lot. I think he's a really good player. But I think that when you have that stage, C.J. Spiller being a good example, runs back the opening kickoff, everybody's like, oh, he's on my ballot.
Rivalry game.
Then he ends up 9 carries, 18 yards. That's not what you do in the big games. If you don't do it in the big games now. But again, Ingram has a chance Saturday. If Ingram goes out and goes for 185 and they win the game and they just can't stop him, and McCoy's okay, he may get my vote. I mean, my vote is totally up in the air right now.
But to me, if Tebow wins the game and plays well, you can throw Colt McCoy's numbers out the window because people are going to start voting on who is the best player in college football, and that's Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
But he's got to win the game.
Yeah.
And Ingram, if Ingram has a big game against this defense and Alabama wins, he zooms to the top.
All right, guys, it's time to put your money where your mouth is. It's time to make your predictions and tell everybody out there what you think is going to happen in this big game. Chase, I'm going to let you go first.
I picked at Alabama 23-21. I think it could go either way. I think, as we talked about earlier, I think special teams could make the difference.
I think I had it Alabama 70, Florida nothing. I think
But you changed. That was
then I changed it.
Then the light went out and came back on, and you were okay.
Wait a minute, the light's back on. I'm going to go with an old school score. Judd Davis's extra point. 24-23, as it was in 1994 Florida.
I'm going Florida 24-14. I think they make a big play on special teams, maybe come up with a big turnover. Game will be decided in the fourth quarter, just like last year.
What a shock that the Florida guys picked Florida and the Alabama guy picked Alabama. And I'm sure the Alabama young lady is going to pick Alabama too.
You don't pick anybody. You stay neutral, and
okay, we'll leave my prediction out
Not
there.
a lot of points from anybody.
I'm picking Georgia Tech too. Georgia Tech, Cincinnati.
I'm going with Clemson, Pat. 28-13.
I'll bet you a beer.
Okay.
All right, that's going to do it for us today. For Pat Dooley, for Chase Goodbread, and Robbie Andreu, I'm Rachel Barbeau. Thanks, guys.